If you've ever questioned why a single Toyota, Honda, Mazda, or Subaru engine can run 0W16 or 0W20 oil in the United States, yet the very same power plant calls for 5W30, 10W30, or even 0W40 in Japan, Australia, or Europe. Then get ready, because what you're about to hear will completely change the way you think about engine oil. Here's the part most people never hear: the uncomfortable reality no manufacturer likes to discuss openly. Oil viscosity recommendations aren't chosen based on what gives your engine the longest life. They're picked based on fuel economy rules, US-specific emissions targets, climate assumptions, and government pressure. Which means millions of American drivers are unintentionally pouring an oil grade into their engines that the original design was never meant to run long-term. And that leads to faster internal wear, higher consumption, noisy valvetrain components, weak oil film strength, and timing chains wearing out far earlier than they should. All because the United States pushed automakers toward thinner oils, even for engines that were originally engineered to run something thicker. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why Japan recommends heavier oil, why the US insists on unusually thin oil, which viscosity actually provides better long-term durability, and how running the wrong grade can shorten an engine's lifespan by 50,000 to 150,000 miles. And trust me, the number one reason behind all of this will completely change the way you think about oil viscosity. So let's start with the truth. Almost nobody wants to say out loud. US fuel economy laws, not engineering, are the biggest reason American engines use 0W16 and 0W20. Japanese automakers selling cars in the US must meet CAFE rules, corporate average fuel economy. These regulations force manufacturers to squeeze out every extra fraction of a mile per gallon they can. And one of the simplest tricks? Using a thinner oil. Thin oil reduces internal drag. Less drag means a slight bump in fuel economy. Better fuel economy means the automaker avoids massive government penalties. We're talking a tiny difference sometimes, 0.3 to 0.8 mpg. But it's enough for manufacturers to ditch the oil grade that protects your engine bist and replace it with the oil grade that protects their CAFE score. Meanwhile, in countries like Japan, Europe, and Australia, automakers are not under the same pressure. So the same exact engine, same block, same pistons, same pump is allowed to run thicker oil overseas. For example, Toyota's 2.5L, a 25A engine, US manual, 0W16. Japan manual, 5W30 or 0W20. Honda's K20C2 K24W, US, 0W20. Europe-Japan 5, W30. Mazda Skyactiv engines, US 0, W20. In Australia and Japan, the 5W30 or 0W30 variants are used. Subaru FA FB engines in the US, 0W20 is used. Japan 5W30, same engine. Different country, different priorities. Why do Japan and Europe avoid thin oil? This is where things become very interesting. Japanese and European mechanics overwhelmingly favor slightly thicker oils for two major reasons. Number 1. Thicker oil maintains a far stronger oil film at high temperature. That means better boundary lubrication, reduced timing chain wear, fewer oil burning issues, and less contamination from blow-by. As engines age, these differences become huge. Thin oils like 0W16 and 0W20 often lead to early oil consumption, noisy valve lifters, higher operating temperatures, VVT issues, and turbo coking and turbocharged models. Reason number 2. Their fuel economy testing procedures don't punish automakers for using safer, thicker oils. Japan and Europe test MPG more realistically without creating an incentive to use ultra-thin oils. That's why a European Corolla often hits 200,000 miles with almost no oil burning. Meanwhile, the same US Corolla can start consuming a quart every 1,000 to 2,000 miles after 100,000 miles on thin oil. Same engine design, different oil grade. Oil thinning wasn't an engineering evolution, it was a business move. Let's go deeper. Before 2010, most Japanese engines used 5W30 or 10W30. Then US CAFE rules tightened, and suddenly every automaker shifted to 0W20. When CAFE tightened again, Toyota released 0W16. Honda adopted 0W16 for hybrids. Nissan began recommending 0W16 for small engines. But here's the twist. These same engines in Japan still approve 5W30 or 0W30. Because in Japan, longevity matters more than squeezing out an extra mile per gallon on paper. Let's address one of the biggest myths. Manufacturers often claim modern engines are engineered with much tighter tolerances, making thin oil necessary. But the truth is much more complicated. Real teardown measurements from Toyota, Honda, and Subaru engines show that rod bearing clearances barely changed. Main bearing clearances barely changed. Piston-to-wall clearances stayed nearly identical, and oil pump output remained very close to older models. In short, engines were not radically redesigned for ultra-thin oil. Instead, ECU calibration, oil pump bypass logic, and oil ring tension were adjusted to accommodate thin oil primarily for emissions and fuel economy, not durability. And the result? Engines in the US wear out faster. Ask mechanics across America, and you'll hear the same story after 80,000 to 140,000 miles. Timing chains stretching much earlier than expected. Oil control rings clogging. Blow-by rising. Oil consumption climbing rapidly. Noisy VVT systems. Turbos accumulating burnt oil deposits. And guess where this happens dramatically less? In countries using 5W30, 0W30, and 5W40. Because thin oil struggles in high heat, long highway drives, hot summers, short trips, GDI engines with fuel dilution, and especially turbocharged temperatures. 0W16 has extremely weak high-temperature film strength, which accelerates wear. In Japan, these same engines tend to last longer, partly due to the use of thicker oils and partly because Japanese drivers follow shorter oil change intervals rather than stretching them to 10,000 miles. And here's a little-known fact. Mechanics have known for decades, switching to a slightly thicker oil eliminates most early wear issues. Many US mechanics quietly admit that moving from 0W20 to 5W30 reduces oil burning dramatically, cuts timing chain stretch almost instantly, and quiets engines noticeably. Turbos also run cleaner with 5W40. GTI-style engines hate ultra-thin oil. But service centers are forced to follow what's printed in the US manual, even if that manual was written around fuel economy rules instead of durability. Now, here are the 3 engine conditions where switching to thicker oil is almost mandatory. Even if your US owner's manual lists 0W16 or 0W20. Condition number 1, high mileage above 80,000 miles. As engines age, tolerances expand, rings lose tension, carbon builds up in the ring pack, valve guides wear, timing chains lengthen, and GDI fuel dilution increases. All of these make thin oil far less effective. In Japan, service manuals often allow 5W30 or 0W30 on engines originally rated for 0W16 or 0W20s. US manuals rarely mention this because it affects CAFE fuel averages. Real-world mechanic data show soil burning often drops by 50 to 70% after switching to 5W30. Hot idle oil pressure rises. Timing chain noise softens. VVT performance improves. Condition number 2, hot climate, above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius. Here's what US automakers don't openly say. 0W16 and 0W20 were optimized for cold US fuel economy tests, not real summer heat in places like Texas, Florida, Arizona, Nevada, or Midwest summers. Japanese oil charts routinely recommend 5W30, 10W30, or even 5W40 above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The US chart often still lists 0W20 regardless of temperature. That's not engineering, that's regulatory compliance. Condition number 3, turbocharged or GDI engines. Turbochargers reach extreme internal temperatures and spin at 250,000 RPM. GDI engines suffer from fuel dilution, which thins the oil even more. So why does the US still recommend 0W20 on some turbo engines? Because it boosts fuel economy numbers for EPA tests. Overseas markets often use 0W30, 5W30, or 5W40 for the same exact engine, leading to dramatically fewer turbo failures. So, which viscosity truly provides the longest engine life? After reviewing mechanic reports, teardown results, oil analyses, and manufacturer technical data, a very consistent pattern appears. Best all-around protection. 5W30 full synthetic. Best for hot climates or extended highway driving, 5W40 full synthetic. Best for brand new engines in cold climates, 0W20 for the first 40 to 50,000 miles. Worst. For longevity, 0W16 and 0W8. These ultra-thin grades exist almost entirely to improve fuel economy test results, not engine durability. Is it safe to switch from 0W20 to 5W30? Yes, completely. Because the same engines overseas already use 5W30. Japanese manuals allow it. Engine tolerances support it. It improves film strength, reduces consumption, increases hot idle pressure, and protects far better at high temperatures. In many cases, switching to 5W30 is actually closer to what the engine's original design intended. What Toyota and Honda engineers quietly recommend behind the scenes goes something like this. 0W20 for the first 20,000 miles. Then 5W30 for almost all driving conditions outside extreme cold. And 5W40 for hot climates, sustained high-load driving, or higher mileage engines. You'll never see this printed in a US owner's manual, but it's common practice overseas. The biggest question drivers ask is, will a thicker oil damage my engine? Answer, no. Because oil pumps are pressure regulated, modern clearances easily handle 30 weight oil, and 5W30 flows nearly as well as 0W20 under real conditions. The only downside? You might lose 0.2 to 0.8 mpg. That tiny difference is exactly why the US forces manufacturers to use thinner oils. At the end of the day, different oil grades reflect different priorities. US priority maximize MPG for government rules. Japan, Europe, priority maximize engine lifespan and heat resistance. The engines didn't change, the oil recommendation did. And the people paying the price are American drivers who unknowingly use oil designed for regulatory compliance rather than engine longevity. So what should you do? Here are mechanic-endorsed recommendations for maximum long-term durability. For engines under 50,000 miles, 0W20 or 5W30. For engines 50,000 to 120,000 miles, 5W30 only. For engines above 120,000 miles or hot climates, 5W40. For turbocharged engines, 5W40D. For towing mountains or spirited driving, 0W30 or 5W40. These are globally accepted viscosities used in the same engines outside the US. The United States didn't redesign engines. It redesigned the oil to meet fuel economy laws. Japan didn't redesign engines. It redesigned the oil to make them last longer. So now the real question is, do you want slightly better fuel economy or dramatically better engine life? Let me know in the comments, what oil grade are you running right now, and what engine are you driving?